Welcome to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Our host is Dave Garrison from Ohio Christian University, a longtime Fortune 100 company top executive and a former U.S. congressional candidate from Texas. Our goal for the Faith and Liberty Talk Show is to give you an opportunity to listen to interviews and discussions with significant authorities and experts on subjects related to Christians engaging in the civil and political arena. The mission of the show is to give you real information and not sound bites that you can really use. We have a website for the show, faithandliberty.org. At this website, you can obtain more information about the show, our guests, subscribe to our newsletter, and become a friend of the show, and like us on our Faith and Liberty Facebook page. You can also access all of our previous shows. Please keep in mind that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show exists only with the generosity and support of our listeners. If our show is of value to you, we would appreciate you visiting our website, faithandliberty.org, and donating to the show. Now, let's begin today's show. Thank you for joining us.
We're privileged today to have Clark Kellogg with us, and I know all Indiana Pacer fans and Ohio State fans know who Clark is. Everybody in the nation who watches March Madness knows who Clark is because of his coverage for CBS. Have you recently moved in a new role with that, Clark?
I have actually had a change. I had been out being the lead analyst on the games. The last 5 years, started in 2009, calling my first national championship game for CBS in 2009, and did that until last season, went through 2013, and I've returned to my former role at CBS, which is as the lead studio analyst for CBS. So we'll enjoy that seat and chair for this year's Final Four, which is in North Texas, and very much looking forward to it. Had a great run while I was out next to Jim Nance.
Sure.
For 5 years in total, and Steve Kerr was with us for the last 3, and now I'm back with my familiar partners, Greg Gumbel and Seth Davis, in the studio in New York, and we'll be at the desk with Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson some for the Final Four, so looking forward to working with those guys for the first time.
Well, as San Antonio Spurs season ticket holder and Houston Rockets fan in the past, those are all great names.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and they're having good seasons as we speak.
Sure. Now, you have a son at Ohio University?
That's correct, yes. Finishing up his senior year there, Dave, playing basketball and having a nice finish to what's been a really neat career for Nick.
Yeah. Is he have NBA prospects, you think?
I don't know if he's good enough to play at the NBA level. I'd be surprised if he was able to do that, certainly right away. He has aspirations of wanting to try to continue to play in some form or fashion professionally and may get an opportunity to explore Europe as a player. We'll see what happens. But I know he wants to try to play, and we're going to give him every chance to try to make that happen and support him as best we can, and then be ready for the contingency plan whenever that has to be kicked into gear.
Fantastic. At Ohio State, I'm sure a lot of the Ohio State fans remember that Clark was the Big Ten's MVP back in the early 80s and got a lot of notoriety for that. I believe you were picked 8th in the first round by the Pacers, right?
That's correct, yeah. Back in 1982, I've been associated with the Pacers franchise since then, Dave. Was only able to play 5 years, had some knee trouble that cut short a promising playing career, and really got my start in broadcasting with the Pacers as a radio analyst, and also did some work for a local radio station here around sports reporting back in that first season away from playing, 1987 and 88. At the same time, had a chance to be a TV analyst for Cleveland State University telecast. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and was reached out to by a general manager of a local station in Cleveland. He happened to be a graduate of the same high school that I attended and knew that I was doing some radio broadcasting. Thought I might be a good fit for local TV commentating for a pretty good Cleveland State program at the time, and that really was the beginning of a broadcasting career now that's spanned close to 3 decades now, which is hard, which is really kind of hard to even say, but that's the reality.
Well, I know you've spoken in our chapel here at Ohio Christian and come and spoken to our athletes. As you know, Tony Stockman, a former standout
Sure.
at Ohio State, is our men's head coach, and we appreciate that. You also work with Fellowship of Christian Athletes and Athletes in Action, I think.
Yeah, no question. Those are two ministries very near and dear to my heart and my wife's heart. Obviously, I played basketball at every level, high school, college, and professionally, was blessed and fortunate to do that. And when I became a Christian back in November of 1986, choosing to give my life to God through faith in Christ, it made sense to use the platform of sports, which had been so much a part of my life and continues to be, as a way to minister to folks and to present to them the joy and challenge and adventure of knowing Christ as Lord and Savior. And that's what both Athletes in Action and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes do, use sports as a vehicle to move people towards a personal relationship with God through faith in Christ.
Well, I know our listeners are usually very curious about how people came to know the Lord. What were the factors that led up to your accepting Christ?
You know, it's interesting. Everybody's story is a little different. If you have proclaimed Christ as Lord and Savior and accepted Him as such, then you have a testimony. You have a story of where you were before and where you now are in that new relationship. And for me, Dave, it was growing up as the oldest of 5 kids in Cleveland, having a God consciousness and a reverence for God at our home, but not really having a sense of what a relationship looked like. Didn't go to church a ton. As a youngster, on occasion, special occasions, we would attend church. But as I ventured into my adult life, first in college and then on to the NBA, circumstances convened and converged. My knee injury, which ultimately ended my career, was part of it. My wife and I, Rosie, we got married after courting the 3 years I was at Ohio State. We got married in the summer of 1983, and she was a factor in moving me to explore the claims of the Bible, simply because she had been exposed to that a little more than me growing up. My own curiosity, I encountered a number of folks through my early life's journey that were Christians and were living according to the standards and statutes of God's Word, the Bible. And I became curious through my knee injury, through my wife's sense of us perhaps missing something that God had for us in relationship because we weren't believers at the time. And just a sense of gratitude for where my life had gone, even though it was during the time that I was transitioning away from playing that the Lord actually became real to me. And those all were factors in at least giving me pause and cause to sit down with the local minister here in Indianapolis in the spring of 1986 to let him begin to unfold God's Word to me. And over a period of time, the living, active Word of God just convicted my heart of needing to be rightly aligned with God by faith in His Son, Jesus Christ. And after reading and studying and wrestling in my spirit with the truths of the gospel and with the Word of God, I bowed my heart and my life to Christ in November of '86, and have not looked back since then.
So you came to know the Lord during your professional career.
That's right. Yeah, I actually had a teammate when I was in college. We called him Preach. His name was Ed Major. He was on fire for the Lord, and at that time I was fine with him being on fire, but wasn't necessarily interested in having that fire in my own life, and appreciated and respected him for his conviction and commitment, but really wasn't quite at that time ready to receive what God offers to everyone as a free gift. New life, abundant life, right relationship with Him through faith in Christ. And it wasn't until my second year in the NBA, I was coming off my second knee surgery. At that time, didn't anticipate not being able to recover fully to getting back out onto the court, and encountered a local minister here who was conducting chapel services, challenged me with the claims of the Bible. God is a perfect, holy God. He created us to know Him and to reflect Him in the earth. We can't do that effectively because of sin, which is really our nature, desiring to go our own way.
Mm-hmm.
God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, as a sacrifice for that sinful nature that keeps us separated from Him. And if we believe that Christ is God's Son and that He lived perfectly, died for our sin, and was raised to new life by God, that we accept those claims for ourselves and believe in our heart and confess with our mouth that Christ is Lord, that we can have that newness of life and that promise of eternity. And that's what convicted me, the living, active, sharper than any double-edged sword Word of God. So I was 20, heck, that was November of 86, so I just turned 25 in July. Was in my third year of marriage. We hadn't yet started to have our children.
Uh-huh.
But that's when the Lord got my attention, and I was ready to receive Him as who He says He is.
Well, in that same vein, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm going to work back to where you just left off. You are presently also the Vice President for Player Relations, isn't that correct? Mm-hmm. At the Indiana Pacers.
Sure.
What does that role entail? And does that give you a platform to share your faith at all?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think anytime you've accepted Christ, you're an ambassador for Him wherever you are. The platforms are different. Some are a little more elevated. Some are a little more visible. But we all, once we come to faith in Christ, have a platform. Wherever God places us, there's a platform to allow His light to shine and to glorify and exalt Him and how we do things and how we say things and how we interact with folks. And obviously this is a position where I have a chance to interact with our players in an effort to help them in their personal and professional growth and development so they can perform at their highest levels on and off the court. That's really what we do, and we try to provide resources. It's not just me. I'm the vice president of the department, but I have a director, Heather Denton, who does a fantastic job in taking care of the needs of our players and families on a day-to-day basis. And then we also have a young man, Drew Franklin, a coordinator of player development, who helps with player appearances and some of the player programming that we do to try to educate and empower our guys to make good choices, to think about their future. And within that context, clearly I have an opportunity to share my faith, to be an example of one who's seeking to live a life that is in line with God's mandates and word. And I can do that in a number of ways. I actually, typically when I'm in town, I'll attend chapel with the guys. On occasion, I'll lead chapel if our resident chaplain has a conflict and isn't able to make it.
So you have a team chapel?
Yeah, we do. Most of the teams in the league, there are 30 NBA teams, and most of them have some type of chapel presence, somebody that may be full-time staff, maybe volunteer. But typically across the 30 teams, there is a 15-minute time of chapel, usually about an hour before game time in just about every city.
So the government hasn't come in and hit you up with separation of church and state yet?
No. It's clearly voluntary. It's not mandated. I mean, guys can come and go as they please. It's not anything that's mandated. It's solely voluntary, truly voluntary, and those who desire to be there are there, and they get to hear the Word of God. There are a number of believers in all walks of life, as you well know, Dave, whether you're in a front office at a pro sports team, whether you're teaching at a university, Christian or non.
Right.
So you have your opportunities, and no different here. A number of believers across the league, both in management positions and coaches and players as well.
We're here with Clark Kellogg, the former most valuable player at Ohio State, and then later the Indiana Pacers star basketball player and March Madness commentator for CBS, and we'll return shortly after a few words from our sponsor. This is Dave Garrison, the host of the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. And before we get back with this week's guest, I wanted you to know that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show and Young America's Foundation, YAF, will hold a conservative women's conference for women and men on the campus of the Ohio Christian University on April 10th. The conference theme is Restore Our American Heritage and will feature a number of Fox News contributors and political activists, including Star Parker, Kate Obenshane, Chrisanne Hall, Ashley Pratt, and Hadley Heath. As the host of the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, I will be the master of ceremonies. There will be breakout sessions covering the fraud of hope and change, Liberty First, Restore America, how healthcare reform will affect millennials and the rest of us, and the war on women. For more information, please go to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show website at faithandliberty.org. Again, for more information, please go to the website faithandliberty.org. Hope to see you on April 10th at Ohio Christian University.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Senator Rick Santorum, Dr. Ben Carson, and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Senator Rick Santorum, Dr. Ben Carson, and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., The Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
We'll return now with Clark Kellogg, the former NBA and Ohio State basketball star. You've been described as wordy, loquacious, and verbose. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm a little bit. Yeah, I've always enjoyed words and reading, so I would say that's probably the case. Yeah, I don't have any real objection to any of that. I like to play around with words. I enjoy reading well-written articles or books or stories. And I kind of fancy myself a closet writer. My wife will tell you I journal fairly regularly, and I always try to turn a colorful, descriptive phrase whenever it seems to be appropriate.
Like, I believe I found some place that had...
That's the danger of Google.
What do they call them? Clarkisms? No,
Yeah,
Kelloggisms.
Yeah, whatever.
They're playing on rollerblades here in Atlanta.
That's going downhill, going fast downhill. Yep, that's up and down, fast-paced action.
You can't drive the car with the parking brake on.
That's being tentative. That's being cautious. You know, that's not going for it. That's holding back a little bit.
I'm glad you're defining some of these because I had a little trouble.
It sounded like you did. I could hear the question in your tone, so I figured I'd go ahead and try to give you a little clarity on them.
It's a volcanic eruption of epic proportions.
Yeah, that's just going crazy, whether it's an individual going back-to-back buckets or if it's a team that just puts together one of those big runs. A volcanic eruption, we know what that looks like. That's an explosion, and of epic proportions is just another way to embellish it.
He is flowing like he's never flowed before.
Well, that's self-explanatory there.
Yeah, it sure is.
Somebody having a career-high night or a career day.
Well, somebody that followed the ABA, I think I know this one, but I want to hear it from you. Can you say ABA shootout?
I'm glad you can appreciate that. That game that league has given basketball, particularly at the pro level,
3-point.
So much, the 3-point shot, the wide open style that we see a lot more than we used to in the past. So much of the history of that league, even though it was a short-lived history, lives on today in the way the game is played.
George Gervin and some of the others, yeah. I think the Indiana franchise came out of that, right?
Oh, no question. Oh, yeah. It actually won 3 championships.
Now we're showing our age here, I think.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. It doesn't hurt. Yeah, we've got a little bit of history on some folks. But I tell you, it's ironic that as we're talking, I just spent some time in celebration of Black History Month with Mel Daniels, Darnell Hillman, Bob Nettolecki, Jerry Harkness, all former ABAers, that are still here in Indianapolis, and then Derek McKee played with the Pacers on the NBA teams that had some success in the late 90s, early mid-90s, and we just were talking about some of the changes in the game and some of the memories that they had, and it's really a rich history of excellence and significant contributions to the game.
Well, there's one thing about the ABA I'm glad the NBA didn't adopt, and that was that crazy multicolored basketball. That was nuts.
The red, white, and blue ball, yeah.
Now, there's one last quote that I have of yours that you are going to have to explain to me.
Okay.
This is what we call in the gym range. Get me in the building and I can spray you.
Yeah, okay. So this is a deal. It's somebody that's a great shooter that has unlimited range. In other words, some guys have range out to 17 feet.
Right.
Some guys shoot way beyond the three-point arc. As a way to really exaggerate somebody's range, it's just anywhere in the gym is his range. And spraying is just pretty current vernacular for splashing shots. In other words, when they go in cleanly and they just make that net pop.
Right.
That's spraying, and a lot of times the younger players are talking about it. We'll mention a jump shot being wet because it's kind of a splashing sound when it hits the net cleanly. So that's where you get the spraying.
Oh, you're pretty good at sound effects.
Well, I was trying to add a little bit to it, Dave, for your understanding there.
Well, having a son in college sports at Ohio University, and I know you've been here on our campus at Ohio Christian, which we appreciate very much, talking to the young athletes here. I'm going to move up to like Division I, which I know you know quite a bit about. What do you think about all this conversation about college athletes being paid?
I don't think we can go there. I don't know how you would do it, and clearly the amateur model doesn't condone that or make a way to pay athletes. I'm of the mindset that there are a couple of things that would be helpful to serve the student athletes on scholarship better. One would be increasing the scholarship to the actual cost of attendance. And I can speak to this fairly directly because we had all three of our children were at one time Division I scholarship athletes. Our daughter in volleyball at Georgia Tech. Our oldest son started his basketball career at Providence College, and after a few years of playing just was tired of the grind and elected to finish up his schooling at Ohio State and not play sports. And then our youngest son, Nick's a senior at Ohio University, and thankfully we've been in a position, my wife and I, financially to be able to supplement what is a full scholarship for those for our three children with a monthly stipend just to meet some of the expenses that the scholarship doesn't cover. And that, to me, is a reasonable change that should take place to be able to add an additional, whatever that number is, a couple $100 a month to the scholarship, but an additional amount to the scholarship to cover those incidental expenses that are part of being a student. Because scholarship athletes don't have the opportunity really to work very much at all during the course of the school year, and nowadays, Dave, because most sports are year-round in their commitment and expectation, it's rare and unfortunately so that kids don't often have legitimate time to do some meaningful work away from their sport in preparation for their lives after they're done. So I would love to see that, and I also would like to see some movement in regards to athletes not being penalized for taking advantage of the platform or the notoriety that they might receive because they are student athletes, particularly in the revenue-generating sports. We're talking basketball and football on the men's side. On the women's side, you're probably talking volleyball, basketball, perhaps track and field, maybe softball. But where those sports where those athletes have an opportunity to perhaps participate in the finances that come from the use of their likenesses and images.
Like a Johnny Manziel or somebody, yeah.
Yeah, I would think there would be some way you might be able to maybe tie a portion of that revenue, a percentage of it, a small percentage of it, to making progress towards your degree, and maybe it's in a fund when you get done after, when you get your degree, that there's some money there that was part of merchandise sales that an athlete was in the middle of. So I would like to see some movement in that regard.
We're here with Clark Kellogg, the former most valuable player at Ohio State, and then later the Indiana Pacers star basketball player and March Madness commentator for CBS, and we'll return shortly after a few words from our sponsors. This is Dave Garrison, the host of the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. And before we get back with this week's guest, I wanted you to know that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show and Young America's Foundation, YAF, will hold a conservative women's conference for women and men on the campus of the Ohio Christian University on April 10th. The conference theme is Restore Our American Heritage and will feature a number of Fox News contributors and political activists, including Star Parker, Kate Obenshane, Chrisanne Hall, Ashley Pratt, and Hadley Heath. As the host of the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, I will be the master of ceremonies. There will be breakout sessions covering the fraud of hope and change, Liberty First, Restore America, how healthcare reform will affect millennials and the rest of us, and the war on women. For more information, please go to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show website at faithandliberty.org. Again, for more information, please go to the website faithandliberty.org. Hope to see you on April 10th at Ohio Christian University.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Senator Rick Santorum, Dr. Ben Carson, and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Senator Rick Santorum, Dr. Ben Carson, and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., The Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
We'll return now with Clark Kellogg, the former NBA and Ohio State basketball star. Not to push this point too much, but a lot of athletes are getting the scholarships, and they get a certain amount of value out of it.
Sure.
But I've heard a number in some universities for the major sports, particularly the men, that some of them only have like a 3% graduation rate.
Yeah. And that's sad. I mean, that's a number that I don't know the accuracy of the number, but there are some that clearly aren't doing the job they should be doing in terms of graduating the student athletes, and that's a crime. And it's a two-way street. The universities have to be really committed to making sure that student athletes are getting the help they need to get meaningful degrees. And there's great responsibility on the part of the athlete to take advantage of the resources and be serious about his or her education.
What do you think about our new football head coach at University of Texas with his player expectations? Have you seen that list?
No, I have not. No.
Oh, you got to hear this. This is great.
And that's Coach Strong, Charlie Strong.
Charlie Strong from Louisville, you bet.
Right.
Who really pushes character. So here's a couple of them. Players will attend all of their classes, sit in the front two rows of all their classes.
I have no problem with that.
Second one, no headphones in class, no texting in class, sit up and take notes. All pretty good. Now, here's the kicker. If a player misses class, he runs until it hurts. If he misses 2 classes, his entire position unit runs. If he misses 3, the position coach runs, and the position coaches don't want to run.
Well, that's a neat way to make sure there are levels of accountability for any indiscretion you might consider when it comes to class attendance and what Coach Strong has laid out. And I don't have any issues with any of that. I really don't. I mean, we all need standards and parameters and boundaries, and it helps when they're clear and they're fair and they're reasonable
and enforced.
And I don't see anything really out of line with those things.
And there's like 7 or 8 more, and one of the things is he's making all the players move back into the sports dorms and actually buying out the leases if they have apartments off campus. So he's really kind of...
Yeah, he's changed. He wants to establish a certain type of culture that he believes in and thinks is conducive to, I don't think just team success, Dave, but I think to the individual growth and development of those student athletes while they're there, and that's part of the responsibility of the head coach to be able to set that tone.
Well, I congratulate him. I think he's doing a fantastic job doing that.
I would endorse all of that because I think it points those young men in a direction that'll serve them well presently and down the road.
What are your thoughts about the athletes when they're interviewed on TV and before they answer any question, they jump in and say, "First, I want to thank God who made all this possible." Do you think that's
I've got mixed feelings about that. On one hand, if it's sincere and it comes from the heart, I have no issues with it. I think sometimes it can come off and actually be kind of a default or rote reaction. And so I think I try to evaluate it based on what I might know of the individual. I'm never one to disdain that, and I'm never one to say it's not appropriate. But I think you just have to if you do that, then you have to do it with sincerity, and you have to even use some discretion in how you reference your thanksgiving to God and when you do it. Just because it's permissible, as Paul writes, doesn't mean that it's always beneficial.
What are your thoughts about how the media treats Christians, particularly in sports?
Well, I think by and large, there's a pretty good, fair approach, but there's also some persecution that's driven by different motives, animosity. The aroma of Christ to those who are perishing is death. And sometimes I think those in the media or otherwise react to strong believers expressing themselves grounded and centered in their faith can be offensive. And so there can be some outlash and some persecution that's unfair and unwarranted. But the Scriptures tell us that as we stand for Christ and we're bold in that stand, that there will be some that will take great offense to that. And that offense will manifest itself in personal attacks. It'll manifest itself perhaps in fewer endorsements for those who might otherwise get them. I mean, there are a number of different things that might come out of that. So I think but by and large, I think because our country is one of liberty and freedom, I think for the most part, the media does a pretty good job of giving athletes their platform, not necessarily always endorsing it or holding it up, but certainly not always denigrating it either.
Here's a question that's probably going to be kind of odd. What do you think of former NBA players that shoot horse with President Obama? And lose.
Well, it's interesting. That's a targeted question, obviously.
Oh, obviously.
I had that privilege, Dave, as many people know.
Right.
Kind of viral in a number of ways, but I had that opportunity and came up short after taking an early lead in our game of POTUS. We renamed the game POTUS in honor of our president, President Obama. And I jumped out to an early lead. I was a little warmed up before he got to the court. He had done an interview with one of our newscasters, Harry Smith at the time. And so I was warmed up and on fire early and was on the verge of making it a very quick, not so good for TV game. And decided to let up a little bit and open the door for momentum to shift. And when it did, I could not regain it. And President Barack Obama took me down by one letter. And what ended up being very disappointing to a few of my basketball friends, I must say. They still will not let me live that down. But the vast majority of folks enjoyed the interaction that the president and I had, and also the fact that it was good competition and didn't really get too upset about the fact that I came up short.
So you weren't paid off to throw the game?
No. There was none of that. No. I know there are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there, but there was none of that. It was legit. And the president has a tremendous love and knowledge of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a legitimate jump shot. it's fabricated. And I've never played a pickup game with him, but I know people that have, and he holds his own pretty well out there.
That's what I've heard.
He's been around the gym a little bit.
Yeah, I still think you could take him, but that's...
Yeah, need be, I mean, but I don't think I'll get another opportunity. He basically told me that when he got it done the first time, there would be no rematch.
Well, you need to come here and play our President Smith. He thinks he's a basketball player, too.
Does he? Well,
yeah.
I might do that. As long as it's something like horse, I won't get
there you go.
Real one-on-one stuff.
What are the pressures on athletes that makes them unique, particularly in the college and pro sports?
Well, in college sports, particularly at the highest levels of Division I in those football and basketball, the revenue generators, there's not a ton of difference in terms of the pressures that pro and college athletes face. I think the greatest pressure is the scrutiny that's part of the territory because what you're doing is so public and so watched and viewed. So I think that's really a significant amount of pressure to have performance evaluated by the masses on a consistent basis, good or bad. And when you're a pro, that means you're most likely in basketball or football somewhere between the ages of 20, could be as young as 19, but on average between 20 and 35. And in college, you're between 18 and 23. So that, to me, is one of the greatest pressures, the scrutiny, the public scrutiny, the high expectations, and sometimes the unrealistic importance that's placed on winning and losing in sports. I think the other thing, in addition to that being in that fishbowl and under the microscope, is you're still trying to develop who you are as a person, as a young woman or young man. And a lot of times you don't get the benefit of that process playing out naturally and comfortably outside of public view. And one of the other things I see with our young athletes too, Dave, is sometimes the pressure that's put on them by family, parents, or others when they have displayed unique ability that might lead to a pro career, and what that does to relationships, parent to child, aunts, uncles to children, friends to those that look like they might be able to play in the pros. That's a bit difficult and disheartening to see because of how that dynamic can affect an individual's normal process of growing and maturing and discovering who they are. So that, to me, those are probably, and they're all tied to the expectations and visibility of really good athletes.
We're here with Clark Kellogg, the former most valuable player at Ohio State, and then later the Indiana Pacers star basketball player and March Madness commentator for CBS, and we'll return shortly after a few words from our sponsors. This is Dave Garrison, the host of the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. And before we get back with this week's guest, I wanted you to know that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show and Young America's Foundation, YAF, will hold a conservative women's conference for women and men on the campus of the Ohio Christian University on April 10th. The conference theme is Restore Our American Heritage and will feature a number of Fox News contributors and political activists, including Star Parker, Kate Obenshane, Chrisanne Hall, Ashley Pratt, and Hadley Heath. As the host of the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, I will be the master of ceremonies. There will be breakout sessions covering the fraud of hope and change, Liberty First, Restore America, how healthcare reform will affect millennials and the rest of us, and the war on women. For more information, please go to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show website at faithandliberty.org. Again, for more information, please go to the website faithandliberty.org. Hope to see you on April 10th at Ohio Christian University.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Senator Rick Santorum, Dr. Ben Carson, and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Senator Rick Santorum, Dr. Ben Carson, and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., The Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
We'll return now with Clark Kellogg, the former NBA and Ohio State basketball star. Well, I hadn't intended to ask you this question, but it just kind of popped in my head. I was home for a few days, had some minor outpatient surgery, so I was watching a lot of the Olympics. And one of the things that is, probably shocking to a lot of people is, did you see any of the Olympics, like bobsledding or?
No, I've just kind of caught some highlights, but haven't watched much.
Well, I'm sure you know this, particularly in summer Olympics in the track. The difference between a gold, silver, and bronze may be hundreds or thousands of a second.
Right.
And the pressure, I'll bet, is so great on those people that it's like they're so great. But when you're talking about they lose by 10,000ths of a second, I would expect that pressure to be just unbelievable.
Yeah, I couldn't even fathom it.
Me either.
Yeah, it's really hard to get your arms around what that kind of pressure to perform can do to an athlete, to a person. So I would have no concept other than trying to project what that would be like.
Because you saw some of them just devastated,
yeah.
And yet they were within 1/10 of a second,
right
after maybe
so close, but so far.
Going for several minutes on a race or something. Kind of going back to the previous subject, do you think there's too much emphasis given by schools, and particularly at the collegiate level, on sports over academics?
I think it can get out of balance, and I think in some cases it does get out of balance. Quite honestly, it's easy to give lip service to the student athlete, but it's really sometimes more difficult to give real service to that desire and aspiration. And in many ways, it is aspirational when you have high-level athletes and you're pushing for wins and championships. You give a lot of investment and resources to facilities and to coaches and to trainers and so forth. And I know a lot of schools do also provide resources on the academic front, but it has to go beyond just the resources. I think when you talk academics and personal development, there has to be a real significant commitment to the soft aspects of what that looks like, creating time so that players feel there's great emphasis on them getting their degree, maybe sacrificing some of the practice time for personal development instruction. And I think coaches have a chance to influence that, maybe more so than anybody else. Carve off a portion of your practice and preparation time for the benefit of personal development away from the sport. Much easier said by me and perhaps by you than done by coaches, obviously. I know but to me that's where we have to try to get to, where you're integrating the development of the young man and woman within that time commitment they have to make for the sport. And maybe you're siphoning off some of that practice time and weightlifting time to give to the attention of their spiritual, emotional, psychological development. And that's a hard thing to do when coaches are rewarded and compensated for winning. So how do you juxtapose that? How do you find the right balance there? And I don't necessarily have the answers other than to make development and education the center part of it and try to make winning a byproduct of that being the focus. And yet we know you have to have talent and resources in sports to be successful. And when everybody's trying to do it at the highest level, then you feel like you're compelled to do the same kinds of things, sometimes to detriment or sacrifice of time and attention to personal and academic development.
One of the things that kind of grabs me, and I've been involved in any number of universities, and the pressure put on athletes in, say, non-scholarship schools can be just as much as it is in the scholarship. Do you think that's not correct? Or?
Well, again, I think it's a question across sports, really, because you're right. There is tremendous emphasis. As a matter of fact, when you talk non-revenue sports, they are definitely committing the same amount of time, and in some cases it might even be more of themselves and the time in their days to that particular sport without nearly the same notoriety or the same adulation and some of the same benefits that come to the revenue-generating sports. So, yeah, I just think the equation has been a little bit upset in terms of proper balance. And again, that's part of it is how highly esteemed sports is in our culture and how easy it is to galvanize around that and to get excited about it because it is dramatic competition. It's unpredictable. It's exciting. It has some glamour attached to it, and it may not resonate in the same manner. And academics may not resonate in the same manner. And universities and institutions have to really be conscious of how they want to frame who they are and what they're about and support those initiatives.
Yeah, I think some of it falls back on the regulating bodies of these various levels, at NAIA or Division 1, 2, or 3, or some of the other organizations that are out there for restricting the amount of practice time. Because I know a lot of these athletes, even at the non-scholarship level, they are involved in that sport all year round, doing something. One of the things that strikes me, and you and I talked about this in front of the students when you were here, about all that time you're spending in that after you graduate, there are benefits from sport. Well, let's talk about that. What do you feel the benefits are from people being involved in sports, period?
I think they're numerous. I think, one, it's the skills you develop in working within a team. And I also think you develop some disciplines for yourself. Initiative, drive, working through adversity. Some of those lessons are best taught and learned through sports and in a team environment, working with other people, understanding the value of team and being able to make sacrifices in your own personal game for the good of the whole. I mean, those are all valuable and really transcendent type principles because they can add value to your life away from your sport. And I think oftentimes, and you've worked in business for years and had great success, you see the value of those people you might hire or consider hiring that have been involved in athletics.
Absolutely.
There's something valuable in that experience that can be translated and useful in other contexts. So I think that's really a non-debatable issue. I think most folks would agree with that. The balance is where you run into the problems, and that's what you and I were talking about. Part of the experience at the collegiate level should be not only to excel and to try to achieve in your sport, but to really be developed in other areas, to have time for summer jobs and internships that have some meaning and value to you, and being able to get away from your sport for periods of time, to be able to take it upon yourself to be accountable and responsible about doing your training and not having to have a coach mandate that we're going to do this off-season conditioning and there's a price to pay. The off-season conditioning program is set up. We're expecting you to do it on your time and on your terms, and we'll see you when we get back together in 6 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks. I think that's something that can be useful, and if a kid doesn't want to take care of his or her business in that time, then you suffer the consequences when you get back to the group. But that's part of learning, too, and I just don't know if we create enough of those opportunities for student athletes. It seems to me as though the tide has turned to wanting to be overly controlling of young student athletes, which is a facade to teaching them responsibility or having them do what needs to be done. Part of that is them doing it because they want to do it and it's the right thing for them to do, not that somebody's got their thumb on them making them do it. And I think we lose some of that with all of the year-round training and mandates that many of our student athletes have to be subjected to.
Well, occasionally, Clark, I'll have a student come and say, would you look at my resume and see what you think? And it might be a basketball player who's been at the top in this division that we compete, and they don't even mention it on their resume. And some of them have been academic All-Americans. And from a business perspective, if I were looking to hire someone and they were both an athlete and an academic All-American, man, they'd rise to the on the top of the stack.
We got plenty of those out there too, Dave. I mean, we've got a number of examples of those out there. And one of the things I've seen with some athletic departments, and obviously I'm biased, but the Ohio State University is my alma mater. I know the football program has put in place a program called Real Life Wednesdays, where in the meeting room, in the film room, where they typically get together to look at football type stuff, they have somebody from outside of the world of sports or who has been in sports talk about a real life skill or a real life experience that hopefully can be useful to them, a job fair where guys were required to write resumes and then be able to interact with any number of potential employers that showed up at a job fair. Put your resume together, present yourself, interact, and learn what kind of skills you can translate from your football playing experience into the work world. What might those look like? Discipline, hard work, teamwork. Those are things that have some value once you know how to channel those. So I know there's some programs out there that are looking to try to broaden the experience of the student athlete in a way that serves the athlete beyond just being part of a team or trying to win championships.
We have some similar programs here, and the athletes here and the coaches involve me a lot. And sports management program and the coaching academic program comes under the business department here. So I get to see a lot of it, and I'm really impressed with what our coaches do. And some of them come from Ohio State, so maybe there's no accident there, you know.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
I interviewed Jim Kelly recently, the Hall of Fame quarterback.
Uh-huh.
He had a quote, and I'm going to read it to you and see what your reaction is to it. It's when a guy has to play hurt and play through pain that his ability and character are truly revealed, and I know you had to do that, and life, like football, gives us plenty of pain. What do you think of this real differentiator between failure and success?
Well, you know what? I think we often learn through adversity, but we can learn through successes as well.
Sure.
I think we need the rain and the sunshine to grow, and clearly the rain is when we run into headwinds or adversity or difficulties, challenges, and the sunshine is when things go according to our plans and desires. And it is a thin line. I think I don't know if you can fully succeed or appreciate success or achievement unless you encountered some level of pain in the process or difficulty or challenge. And I think success to me is being able to, one, make the most of your God-given abilities and opportunities, but also part of it is being able to work through the rough spots and the hard spots and the difficulties and the life challenges that none of us are immune to in terms of loss of loved ones, injury if you're an athlete. I mean, there's so many different things that can derail us or throw us off track or off stride, and part of success is being able to deal with those things head on and come out on the other side in some form or fashion, or persist in trying to work through them. And that to me is part of the success coin. I mean, resilience is one of those attributes that I think any person that has success has in some form or fashion, the ability to persist and persevere when things are tough, and the ability to not become complacent when things are going well, that desire to keep striving for improvement or being better.
I know that, or you knew this question was going to come up. With all the problems we see with some athletes, movie stars, musicians, what is intoxicating about fame that causes so many of them, seemingly so many of them, to go off the deep end?
Well, I tell you, I was just in one of my devotionals the other day was reading that the greatest enemies of godly living are the flesh, the world, and its standards and ways of operating, and the devil. The flesh is what we're talking about when you're talking about the intoxicating nature of fame. We all desire to be esteemed, to be recognized, to be applauded for what we do, to be elevated. That's a natural desire. But with sin, it gets misplaced. It tends to want to be self-centered, that exaltation and adulation, instead of Christ-centered. And when that equation is out of balance and out of whack, then I think that's part of what lends to fame being so intoxicating. And it's so highly esteemed in our culture when you are known and people know your name that you don't know. And with some fame comes fortune too. That can be leveraged to increase your bank account in certain ways, and that too brings another set of intoxicating challenges. So I think it's a combination of a number of things, but at its core, it's self-centeredness and pride, and having that fueled when you reach a level of notoriety and income. They don't always go hand in hand, but when they do, then it can put you in a place where you elevate yourself above others and even above your need for God, and that's when it can really go off the tracks.
Really unfortunate. We've seen this so many with the child actors who then in their 20s go off the deep end, and it's really troubling. So what advice would you give to a parent who begins to realize, I have a son or a daughter with special athletic ability that is going to maybe earn them a college scholarship? What would you say to those parents?
I think a couple. Well, primarily that it's important to ground our children in the essentials of faith in God through Christ, and the attribute of empathy and humility. And if you have faith, then it's hard to be. You can be prideful, but it begins to dissipate rather quickly when you make Christ the center of who you are and what you're about. So groundedness in faith, to me, leads ultimately to the kind of humility that's required to handle whatever success you might enjoy. That would be my recommendation. Let's think about who your children are as people, what you would want them to reflect as people, and that's really the only way you can hope to have a person be able to withstand whatever fame he or she might have, is to be grounded in those essentials of faith and humility and empathy. Because it's hard to be puffed up and full of yourself when you know who God is and who Christ is, and when you've got a sense of compassion and empathy for other people. Then it becomes important to be gracious in whatever God affords you in terms of blessing or opportunity. But that's the only way. I don't know of any other way to try to help parents that might have gifted children, not just athletically, but it could be musically or in other areas. But those are the things that certainly Rosie and I have tried to make that a priority with our kids as we've raised them, to treat other people the way the Lord would want you to treat them. Never think more highly of yourself than you ought. Be about doing the right things for the right reasons, and always carry yourself with humility.
The one thing I've noticed over the years, being fairly close to the Spurs, I worked for USAA for a while, and we owned the San Antonio Spurs, as you probably realized, and then we sold it to a group of investors. But I've watched the Spurs deal with some of this. Are they kind of unique, or are there a number of the NBA teams that you feel maybe do a little bit better job in that area?
I don't know if there's anybody that does it much better than the Spurs. I mean, they're a model for any sports franchise, I think, in terms of culture and consistency. And it starts at the top with ownership, and then with your head coach, Greg Popovich, has been there a long time, and he's established a winning recipe based on character. And you have a Hall of Famer and a guy like Tim Duncan, who's been at the center of it for almost 2 decades now. Prior to that, you had David Robinson and others that were anchors in terms
A good
of character.
believer.
Yeah, exactly.
He is at Max Lucado's church and heads up men's ministry. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No, I did. I knew he was very close to Max. I knew that because I had encountered him years ago at the Final Four and had read and heard that they were close, and that's awesome to hear and not surprised. But the Spurs are a model for a number of, for any pro sports organization because they've been successful for a long, sustained period of time, and they've done it with tremendous class. And I've not been on the inside of that organization, but clearly what they've done and how they've done it has been a real model. And I think there are not as many teams out there doing it as you would hope, but there are a lot that are aspiring to it and trying to put those kinds of pieces in place. But it's people, and it's people that are grounded in values that are timeless and committed to adding other people that share those same values so it can be perpetuated over time.
Well, I'm going to try a kind of a strange analogy on you a little bit. And as you're probably aware, Greg Popovich graduated from the Air Force Academy and uses some military examples here and there. And so I'm going to use one on you relative to both Division I, we'll say, teams as well as the NBA teams. There's been a lot of study of soldiers when they fight. And one of the things that they've found is they might join up for God and country, but they found that they are fighting for each other as comrades in arms. How's that been in your career, or that which you've witnessed?
Well, my career was cut short, and I wish I would have been exposed to that type of mentality. I don't think I ever got there quite as a player, even in college. Felt it a little bit in high school, but at 16, 17, you're not quite sure. And then in the pros, my career was really short, and we were struggling as a team. But I've been able to see it and witness it in my post-playing days from afar, different teams. And it really is part of, I think, every championship caliber team or every team that succeeds at a high level, organizations that succeed. It becomes...
We're in this together.
In it together. It's a little bit, it's bigger than any individual. And there is a sense of desiring to not let your colleague or your teammate or your coworker down. You want to be there for them, or your family member. You want to be there for her or him, and that has such a powerful impact. And it really is one of the secrets to being able to achieve at the highest levels, individually or as a group. And that's something I aspire to, quite honestly, Dave, to be a server of others and to be able to give my very best first to the Lord and then to others so they can reach whatever potential that God has given him. And how do you do that consistently? Being other-centered is and while giving maximum effort to God's glory is really what it is in a nutshell. And it takes work, and it's a lifelong process, but it's certainly worth aspiring to and working towards.
Well, is a competitive nature anti-Christian?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't think so.
I don't either, but...
question. I don't think it is. I mean, you want to be a warrior for that which is right, for that which is good, for that which is just, and within competition you can do that. And I don't think you can. I don't think being a Christian and being competitive are exclusive, mutually exclusive. They coexist, and I think actually part of being a consistent God glorifying individual is having a competitive spirit that's governed, as is all other parts of your life, by Christ being at the center of it.
Well, I'm going to try a really strange one on you, because I think you will understand this question. Did you ever see the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt?
No, it's on my list, and I haven't watched it from start to finish.
All right, it won't matter that you haven't seen it, but there's a line in there with Billy Beane, the general manager of Oakland A's.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I hate losing more than I even want to win. I hate losing even more than I want to win." Does that ring a bell with you?
It resonates. I don't know if I don't think I've gotten there completely in my own thinking. But I understand exactly what that what that means, that there's such a disdain for losing. I mean, winning requires such an investment and a commitment and an expending of energy that I think sometimes it's harder to enjoy it, more so than fighting off the misery that would come from losing. So I think that's how I look at that. That winning, it requires so much of you, and to do it over and over again, it takes so much energy that it sometimes is hard to enjoy. And on the flip side of that is hating losing is a motivator to do what you need to do to win.
Right. Well, Clark Kellogg, we thank you so much for what the Lord's been doing in your life and for your stand for Him and the impact that you've had on many lives. And we thank you so much for the impact you've had on the athletes and students here at Ohio Christian University. And we pray God's blessing on you, and we thank you for being on the show.
Dave, an absolute pleasure. Good to visit with you. Thoroughly enjoyed when I was on campus and got a chance to meet you nose to nose. And you continue to do the work you're doing and shining that light on those young folks you get a chance to interact with. That's very, very important, significant work. Glad that you're doing it.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, appreciate it.
On behalf of our host, Dave Garrison, I'd like to thank you for listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show today. For additional information about the show, please go to faithandliberty.org, where you can access previous shows, like us on our Faith and Liberty Facebook page, and access other resources. Please keep in mind that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show exists only with the generosity and support of our listeners. If the show is of value to you, we would appreciate you visiting our website, faithandliberty.org, and donating to the show. The opinions and comments represent the views of our speakers and may or may not represent the views of Ohio Christian University. May God bless you, and thank you for listening to our show.